Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding and the voice of sex on prep. Welcome, Romana.
Oh, yeah. What a topic, eh? What
Yeah,
a topic.
I feel like obviously this little mini series, we're going to talk about the things that people maybe don't talk about. Obviously, if you've got a coach that's of the opposite sex, you might not, want to talk about stuff like that. Maybe your partner, as you mentioned on the last episode, is outside of bodybuilding. Maybe this is your first prep. Like, there's certainly things, and actually, Sarah mentioned it on our webinar about not being, having that flatten off and not feeling that zest, as it were. And one of the listeners who joined it said that she'd messaged separately to speak to Sarah because no one she hasn't felt she could talk about it. And I feel like that's the position people are going to be in, right?
Obviously, it is integral to a relationship. Let's not beat around the bush. It's an important part of intimacy, connection. It's what you want to do with your significant other, and it's that kind of balance between. And this came about really basically because of a voice note we had, voice messages we were having together, and it was basically, I think Dan and I had gone the longest we'd ever gone in our nearly 3 year relationship without having had sex. We're both on prep, and it was about 6 weeks. I think the longest we went before that was when I was prepping for Chicago, and that was 4 weeks. And it was me and him had a conversation. We sort of scheduled it in.
Yeah,
No,
between me.
basically what I was saying with the voice note to you was that, like, literally we were both on high days, and it was like we both like to eat after having sex. So it's like, right, between meals, this and this in the evening, some downtime, we could actually do the deed. And that might sound very kind of regimented, but I mean, ultimately, prep is. But the conversation that Dan and I had, because a couple of nights before that, we thought we may have the energy slash urge, and we both were fucked. And I think that the biggest thing I want the listeners to take from this this particular episode is that just because you're on prep and your libido is dropping off, and maybe it's not being as frequently, that doesn't define your relationship. That doesn't make, or it shouldn't. I suppose that's the red flag, really, isn't it? If you're with somebody, whether they're another bodybuilder or whether they're not into bodybuilding at all, it's it shouldn't define the relationship. It's an important part, but if you're with that right person and you're not feeling it because you're on low food, you're on high output, you're probably not sleeping great. And let's just face it, when you're really lean and really bony, it can actually be a bit more uncomfortable. Like,
For sure.
if
It is as well. It's like,
you're both on prep effectively.
yeah, I love how you frame that because I had some sort of pre-thoughts before this, and it's like sometimes I just want to have a cuddle, right? Like I
Yeah.
just, you're heavily fatigued, you're doing all of these things in a day, and you don't have to lose per se the closeness. It's more, the act of sex. And I don't know about you. Again, we're gonna go TMI, but I don't want to just go. It's like, having the foreplay, etc. is important to me. I'm not someone that can just jump in.
Yeah.
And that's an integral part to me as a human being. Before meeting Matt, it was like I actually want more of a connection, and that, essentially facilitates the act of sex for me. So it's like it's not just wham bam, thank you, man. It's an actual, it's an experience, as it were, if you know what I mean.
That's a female thing in general, and it isn't, generally you need to get us going a little bit first. It's like, yeah, a spontaneous quickie in the middle of off season has its place, has its purpose, but ultimately when you're wanting that connection, it does involve foreplay, which again, like, thinking back to previous preps, there's certain elements of things within foreplay that I'd be up for in off season, but in prep, it's just like that's actually really uncomfortable. And how do you then? You can't say that mid-act because it's the moment killer. Like that's actually painful now. Can you not? It's it is that kind of being able to communicate that with your partner at a time that is maybe not going to be a mood killer if the mood is there, because that would be the other thing, isn't it? It's like you've got the time, you've got the energy, and then a little something or other and you're just like, yeah, I'm not really feeling that, and suddenly that mood has shifted for both of you.
Yeah.
But it was the for me and Dan specifically, it was a conversation reminding each other that just because the frequency is diminished doesn't mean that there's any less attraction, want. I mean, personally, when I'm in prep, I am not very affectionate.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel,
I,
yeah. It goes.
like I don't I feel so uncomfortable. I don't want to be touched. It's that was a very hard conversation around the Olympia because I got off stage from prejudging and Dan wanted to give me a hug and I was so oversensitized, even or overstimulated and oversensitized that even being hugged by my person made my skin like it just hurt. I just didn't want it. And that again is also quite a hard concept. For I mean, luckily Dan's very understanding and we can communicate very, very well. But these feelings are all very normal and natural when you're on prep to just kind of you're so goal focused, you're so goal driven, and you just don't necessarily want to factor that in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. After the last prep, I've mentioned it on the pod a few times, but Matt actually, I think it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after, still reversing out, still lean, etc. And Matt just said to me, I just want a hug, like an actual hug, like an intentful hug, because I certainly hadn't realized that the hugs were just me standing there and he's sort of hugging me, and I guess just talking now again, this is why podcasts are useful, and it's brought a thought in my head. Maybe that's why I'm having this sort of ability at the moment to be a bit more like, let's have a cuddle laying on the sofa with some shit TV on or whatever. Maybe I've got it in the subconscious to don't let it get to that point, as it were. But certainly the deeper I am now, because it's like 14 weeks, it's certainly getting to that point where it's like I can do my work, I can do my training, I can do my cardio, my steps, but the availability for anything above that, it's like you know what you need to do in a day, don't you? And it's difficult because it's hard to communicate if you don't communicate anyway with your partner. So this is where, us talking about it, and it's like when you go into a prep, it's all well and good, you got some body fat, we spoke about this before. But communicating with your partner before you even go into a prep, having a solid foundation, they're a solid base, whether they're a bodybuilder or not. This is the foundation of any relationship. So then, like you say, timing it around when you communicate these things. And also I feel like there's elements of, we're sitting here talking about our sex life, right? Not making it awkward, not feeling like it's an elephant in the room.
Exactly that. It's like if you're with a partner, you should be able to have these conversations. And it might be that that actually is a mini challenge for some people out there to be able to feel comfortable enough with their partner to bring these things up. I mean, this prep, because Dan's on prep as well, we're both kind of in the same headspace with it. So it's kind of easier. But thinking back to when I've been on prep and Dan hasn't, it's for me as well, it's like, do we have the sex and end up going to bed later? And then I'm waking up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
having lost an hour and a half of going to bed earlier because of, you know, whatever. You can't do it. And it was really hard to kind of say to him, you want me to do this thing, you want me to do the bodybuilding thing, you want me to get lean. I need to sleep. I need to I need to go to sleep now because I'm going to be awake at butt o'clock. And unfortunately, where he hadn't finished work until say 7 o'clock, by the time it gets to that point, well, it's now 8:30 and I need to be going to sleep now. So sorry, we don't have time. And it is hard to, because you've also got to manage the potential rejection that other person may feel. Although it's not intended as rejection, it can be felt as rejection.
Yeah, and I love how you've raised that because actually just thinking, we've got this communicative relationship, as it were, with our partners. But I guess outside of that, if you're in prep and you're maybe worried that the other partner might start to look elsewhere or, be looking at things on Instagram, be going out or whatever, I guess there's an element of this could spiral into like as you say, are they gonna, and if they are a bodybuilder themselves, if they're in off season, there's merit to think about steroid use and what's going on there. So if you've got a guy that's highly sexed and you just can't do it, and then maybe you end up doing it because you feel bad and you don't want, and it's this vicious cycle, isn't it? And it's very difficult, obviously, to reach everyone that's listening because there's a lot of different people listening, but that in itself could pose problems to either doing it when you don't want to because you're worried or worrying so much that it would actually be maybe quite obvious when you actually do have sex, feel this sense of rejection. Then, I've certainly done it in the past with previous partners, and it, when you're not game for it, it's difficult, right? We've said about sort of warming into it, etc. And that could come off in a different way. Or if you don't do it, you could build anxieties because you do think maybe they are going to stray or look at things online or whatever. It's quite hard to actually quantify that for people, that might be listening in this scenario as well.
Yeah, I mean, I Dan's been my only sort of, excuse me, long-term relationship since I started bodybuilding. So as far as kind of being with a non-bodybuilder in a relationship and the pressure of not wanting to and doing it anyway, I don't really have the experience because I was either completely single and uninterested or dating Gen Pop who didn't understand and quickly realized that actually that person wasn't for me even before we got to the sex side of things because they couldn't comprehend what bodybuilding was about. But I have been in relationships in the past, especially when I was younger, where the guys, they put it on me, and then I'm just not feeling it. But you do go through the motions, and it it is an uncomfortable place to sit because again it goes back to that rejection and the reaction of the other person and feeling pressured. And I think the biggest thing to take from this mini episode itself is that if you are being made to feel pressure to have sex with that other person because they're demanding it, or you don't, it could even go down to they may not intentionally be wanting to manipulate you, but well, you obviously don't want to be with me anymore if you don't want to have sex with me. It's not that at all when you're in a dieted state. And that was the conversation. I mean, Dan's got no concerns that I'm going to stray, and I've got no concerns that he's going to stray. But it also doesn't hurt to have that conversation and just be like, we're both in the zone at the moment, and that's okay. And when we have had sex, it's still the same as it has been before. It's not like the fire or the intensity has dissipated. It's just at this moment, we're too goal focused or just too fucked at the end of the day to want to.
Yeah, yeah. It's so
Yeah, pressure.
it's, the pressure around it, I think that because I've had this in previous relationships before, Matt, certainly, in when I was married, it was like, oh, it's been a week, I should probably prompt something here because that's what wives do. And it was I made it in my own mind, right? So there's
Yeah.
societal pressures and everything.
Oh yeah, there is that as well.
Yeah.
Pressure you put on yourself.
Yeah, because it's like, am I a dutiful partner, wife, whatever it is? I also find as well what me and Matt have spoken about because he's dieting also. Obviously, we're not in prep for shows, but he's also dieting, and we've said, like we don't want to lose that. Where I'll say to him, "I think you're fit," I have a bit of banter with it, and try and just make him feel attractive, and that's because I want to. It's not because he's pressurizing me to, but sometimes, like I say, the cuddle or whatever it may be, or a gesture, or if you're, depending on your relationship, if you're quite gesture driven, like some people write notes to each other and things like that, you can do little things like that. He might bring me home a bunch of flowers or something. So there's little things within that. And then, like you mentioned, right at the start, a high day. It's amazing when you get a high day, how different you do feel quite quickly on that day, right? It doesn't necessarily last, as we know, but being honest with yourself and going, actually, I probably could make a bit more of an effort here on a high day. And it seems the outside world be thinking, what the fucking hell are these women on about? However, if you get it, if you're in this realm, it's true, right? Like the high day's like, oh, suddenly I can fucking function.
No, there have been high days where digestively it's got to the end of the day and I'm just like
Yeah.
the thought of being poked around down
Good
there
point.
with
Yeah.
all this food, like I just can't. So it's absurd. It's like the energy's there, but I feel so full of food that like I'm worried you're gonna pop me.
Oh my God, I just remember, right, on one of my shows last season, my coach got me to have Cialis the night before. So I'd had a Dulcolax. I used to use the liquid, but that's very invasive. Now I use the gels like we've spoken about over voice note if I need to. But I had
Will be
that.
another episode about
Yeah.
movements.
Yeah, we will be doing that. Perhaps next one. I had some Anavar and then all my normal stuff. And I was like in this state where I'd had, basically a Viagra type vibe. Then I'd had a sleeping tablet. And one evening out from a show, we still had sex. I passed out and I can't even remember any of it. Like it was such a weird thing. And I was like, I don't really know what happened. Even to the point, this is off topic, but the next day my coach said to me, "Did you have a bowel movement?" And I was like, "I don't know." And Matt was like, yeah, she had a bowel movement, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is so embarrassing!" Like,
That's amazing. That's amazing.
but it
I
is as
think
well.
like the times, well, thinking back on it, the time I've had sex before the night before a show was Empro and I won it. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the thing.
Ah, ah. It is as well. It's like, there is some more food going in for most people. Some people, you can't warrant it depending on your peak, and that's person dependent. However, sometimes you get that close. It's going to depend so much on the person, but sometimes you get that close and you sort of almost have this like, well, I am here, I'm in a good space. Whereas, a lot of the time it can be this sort of like, fucking hell, I'm competing tomorrow. What do I do here? I just had a message on one of my question boxes saying any advice for fear and nerves, etc. on show day, and that can accumulate into obviously you've got the digestive backing up, all of these things. Do you feel like having sex, or are you in such a good space that you're like, let's have sex?
It's it it's totally you can't like predict it. It's just got to be how you feel at the time. But again, it's about you within your body and whether you and if Dan and I, well, Dan's show day's the day before mine. So it's like he's going to be full of food, and it's likely because of how what we've learned from the previous peaks, it's likely that actually I won't have that much that night because of how I need to dry out, and we're playing the condition game. So he might be there like ready to go, but he's also very understanding if I'm not. So I've got that on my side. Whereas I know a lot of people maybe don't, and there is this kind of pressure that, well, you don't love me anymore because of this. So
Yeah.
here's a towel, mate. Go on, off your pop.
Yeah.
Go sort yourself out. Don't mind.
Yeah, well, yeah, and also I guess an extension of this that I touched on, if your other half is using anabolics, test, whatever, this is also females as well. It can be quite unexpected when your sex drive rises and maybe you didn't expect it. And it can come as a bit of I feel it more when I'm on anabolics in off season. Like I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
fucking hell. Matt, we're having sex and I'm going to the gym to fucking own it. This diet with the Masteron in, I've got a bit of pep in my step, a little bit, a little bit more, but it certainly hasn't driven the sort of the sex drive and as much in the gym, right? Like I feel there's a bit more in the gym. Like I'm just able to last a bit longer than before the sort of
Yeah.
fatigue hits, but I definitely haven't felt any raise in sex drive like at all.
No, like off-season cycle is very, very similar to my prep cycle. Um, the difference being we pulled MPP out now about 2, 3 weeks ago, I think. Whereas MPP would stay in for the duration of my off-season cycle. And I think it is a body fat and food combination with the anabolics that will increase my libido. It's not as simple as just having the anabolics. And I think it would say the same for Dan because, he's 10 days out now on quite a high load. They've started titrating certain things down a bit. But again, he's equally as fucked at the end of the day as I am. And it's like, well, what you could say, well, why don't you do it in the mornings? Well, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the last thing I want to do is have sex because my brain's thinking, I've got to get up, I've got to meal prep, I've got to walk the dogs, I've got to get to cardio, I've got to do client replies, I've got to do this, that, and what. The list's never ending. And I find if my head's very, very busy with other thoughts, I find that very difficult to shut out. So when it comes to the intimacy side, the last thing I want is to be there trying to be intimate, but trying to suppress my overthinking at the same time. And I'm better now. The PTSD stuff isn't as acute, but it was a real struggle at one point to shut that off
Yeah.
and be present in the moment. And I think in prep, you can get the compounds that you use in prep can also attribute anxiety, overthinking, and that in itself can also be a bit of a libido killer.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
so many factors to it.
Yeah, like it, you just don't. I personally don't feel like you don't really come across. This is why we're doing it, right? You don't really come across these conversations where it's like, the use of anabolics. It's not just, oh, I'm gonna gain muscle or get, people say, oh, I'll get lean or whatever, however you want to frame it. There's so many things that come with it, and I feel like it's like the potential side effects, but would people know actually this could raise your sex drive and this could do X, Y, Z? It's like, oh, I take this and this is the result. These are the potential side effects from a this is a bad side effect, right? And this is why it's difficult, I think, as well for females because when you're inundated with these wild feelings, thoughts, etc., if you are using PEDs, it's quite hard to sometimes quantify that. And also, there's again more males that speak about it. They say like, "Oh, when I come off X compound, I look back and I'm like, holy shit, who was I?" So you also maybe don't know that you're changing parts of your personality, you're changing how you act, how you think, until you come off cycle as well, and that's quite difficult, isn't it?
I mean, especially for me personally, MPP will raise, like, I have a level of anxiety on the daily anyway, and it sort of sits here and it's manageable. MPP raises it to sort of here, and I can in off season I can self soothe it quite well because I'm full of food and I know it's just the drugs. But in prep, it becomes more difficult to self soothe. And it occurred to me the other day, it's like, oh, actually that baseline has come back. Is it still a little bit higher than it normally is because I am on prep and low body fat does provoke high anxiety for me anyway. But since the MPP has been removed, it's like, oh, actually, I am a little bit less elevated anxiety wise.
Yeah.
Um, but it is hard to manage.
Simplify.
Yeah,
And if it is, if you are someone that's listening that whether you use PDs or not, if you're quite an anxious person anyway, and like what we've spoken about, it's more of an experience and connecting with your partner, etc. Even the deficit in itself. So any naturals listening, you know, the deficit in itself can make you a bit touchy, a bit edgy. I remember the first couple of ones, I was like, what the hell is happening to me? The last thing I want to do is have sex, and that's quite hard to put across.
Females specifically, natural or enhanced, when you're in a calorie deficit, what happens? You lose your cycle,
Yeah.
you lose your period, you lose menstruation. That is because your body doesn't have enough energy to actually produce the hormones that result in menstruation and the menstrual cycle and your general fertility cycle in as it is in general. So whether you're enhanced or not, you're still going to have a downregulation of hormones. So that in itself, low estrogen, low progesterone, low testosterone, they're going to have an impact on libido, but also on mood and anxiousness and mental health in general. So we talk a lot, I think, because we both do use PEDs. We talk reference that a lot, but it's no different for a natural competitor when it comes to what your hormones are actually doing. If anything, it's probably worse because you're not replacing them with anything.
Yeah, exactly that. When you are low test, and I can attribute that to being natural for so many years, it just feels weird. My ex he had very low testosterone for a male, and he was like a shadow of himself when we started to look into it, and it was, I guess I'd attribute it to it's like a severe depression. That's what it felt like. He was like under this cloud all the time, and I don't think he realized the impact of how that makes
Yeah.
you feel as a partner as well. And, so low test in itself, we're not saying every natural's got low test, but generally speaking, is something that is on the peripheral for male and females, isn't it?
If you're dieting, it's going to be. And like, I mean, the grey cloud is pretty accurate because I remember 2021 came off prep, and 8 weeks later, I couldn't drive 10 minutes without needing a nap. It was like the world was in black and white,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until I had my blood work done and my testosterone, well, all my hormones were pretty flat. My testosterone was unreadable, like it was that low. And that was when I started femtest because the NHS just told me to stop exercising. Um, yeah,
Thanks,
it's
guys.
like, all right, and now I was on prep, but we're now 2 months down the line. There's no cardio, there's lots of food. I'm only training 4 times a week.
Yeah.
Like it's not hypothalamic amenorrhea, it's something else going on here. And as soon as that testosterone went in, it was like the world came back into color. And I've had it where my fem test has been underdosed, and Dan's just been like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Like literally. And then we've done my blood work, and he to apologise for having a go at me for my mood, because it's like, well, that's why, because like my hormones are in the bin, and I'm not producing any of my own, and it's obviously going to impact my mood.
Yeah, for sure. Mine the same. My test was bottomed out, and that's the reason I went on femtest. And like you say, you start seeing cut, like you're like, oh, I feel better here. Like it's like this. And Matt actually described it when he did a photo shoot prep previously as a natty, and then he went assisted in the reverse out, and he was like, "Fucking hell, this is
Took on the world.
yeah, yeah."
But what I would caveat it with is those who are post show and have done a diet phase and have had blood work done and their testosterone has come back in the bin, there are other options to boost your testosterone naturally other than femtest. And there's got to be the consideration that if you're putting in femtest,
You're not natural.
at some point you're either staying on it or you've got to come off of it. So actually, post show is probably the best time to try and boost your hormones naturally and restart your hormonal production naturally rather than just resorting to femtest. I was quite naive at the time, um, and it's something that it didn't occur to me until probably 2 years afterwards that actually I'm going to need hormone replacement now in some way, shape, or form for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it's you
Mm.
know
It
that's
is.
a
I was really lucky actually. I was able to gain, education and make an informed decision beforehand. And I always say this, like I'm very grateful to the people that were around me that could talk me through it and XYZ. But certainly, yeah, like you say, a very good point there. Don't sort of rush into decisions. Any PEDs, guys, like please, please have conversations and ask questions, and also do your own research if possible. I understand you don't necessarily want to go on Google and type, but there's ways and means to do that, and we speak about it on the podcast for a reason. It's important to not hopefully make these ad hoc decisions. I understand it's like, oh, this is a remedy, but actually you've got the rest of your life ahead of you, and that's super important because it's yeah.
I mean, to put it in perspective, when I started Femtest, I what were 2025? I was 36.
Mm.
So, you know, in bodybuilding terms, not a spring chicken. If you're in your early 20s, is that something that you really want to be doing for the rest of your life? And the subsequent health risks that can come alongside with that as well. You know, it's not just muscle growth, it's organ growth, increased risk of cancer, reduced risk of or reduced chance of fertility, all of these things. If you're in your early 20s and you want children,
Yeah. Ask the questions. Always ask the questions, And if this is being recommended to you and you're listening and you're thinking, I actually had so my mum used to be a cleaner and she used to work alongside this lady and she messaged me ad hoc on Instagram saying, my daughter's been recommended to take natural testosterone boosters. She's eight, I think it was 8 weeks out. And I was like, okay, and how does your daughter feel about that? Like, does she want to do that? And she was like, "Oh no, my daughter doesn't really want to do it." And I was like, "Well, tell her coach, tell her I don't want to take the natural protein." And even if it's natural, she didn't want to take additional supplements for that. So again, remembering you have a voice in this scenario, because once you take anything, whether it's natural remedies or whatever, you're still looking at enhancement per se. And there's a cost, there's longevity, there's lots of things, and it's important to not just rattle around for the sake of it and actually have intention behind what you use.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's a dodgy old game, this, isn't it?
So above all else, guys, of course, the communication from the sex standpoint, being able to, again, we don't know who's listening, right? So it's different scenarios, but being able to find that time to be able to explain how you feel, also that can lift a burden when you're feeling a certain way around sexual activity. Being able to even on one of your walks, process, I'm feeling a certain way. I think it's good to speak to my partner about this and finding that time to sit down and do that and try not to, build the anxieties that it's a negative. Try and see it as a positive for your relationship. If you're looking to pursue this and you're going to do this for a long time and your partner is your person, is super important. And of course, if you've got any questions from listening to this, Romana and I, you can reach out. And if next episode we talk about digestion, if anyone's got questions beforehand, of course, about that, but also about, this side of thing, if you want someone to just sort of go a bit back and forth with.
I mean, my go-to is, just because I may not want to have sex with you right now, it doesn't mean that I find you any less attractive or that I love you any less. It's just I don't have the energy or the mental capacity or I don't feel comfortable in my own skin, let alone being touched. And really driving home the point that it's not them,
Yes.
it's you. And it's a symptom of the phase that you're in currently. It's like going back to my last prep, Dan was mid off season, and bless him, he was like, "I just feel like a fat mess, and that you don't find me attractive." So, he's like 9 minutes of cardio a day, 18,000 steps, eating dust, and I've got like glutes striated to my ass crack. That's why I don't want to have sex with you. It's not because you're in off season and you've got a bit of extra timber
Yeah, we
at
like
all.
it.
It's
It is as well. It's that, Matt says when I'm, getting closer to a show, he's like, it's like you're a 14-year-old child. Like he's like it almost feels a bit
Yeah,
like you said earlier, you sort of like bone on, but it's
I've felt that when Dan's been in full off season and I'm really lean, it is just like it's more I feel that I'm the odd one, not because he's got extra body fat. It's like, yeah, I just everything's so lean, it does just feel you're looking at yourself and you're like, this is weird.
yeah, I look a bit weird. It's cool, but I look a bit weird. I love it. I love it. Well, guys, what an episode. And we continue to deliver all of the TMI. And again, it's part of us, like it's who we are. We stumbled across voice notes to each other, don't we? And we're like, an idea is born and it's important. I feel like we're going to make some good movement in the space with these episodes because you just don't hear people that will just talk honestly.
That's the thing. It's like thinking back to 2021. There wasn't I don't know, there might have been, but I certainly hadn't found it. The only sort of people that were talking about bodybuilding were men.
For sure.
And the way they were talking about females within the bodybuilding space was quite derogatory.
Sure.
And actually we need to I feel very strongly about changing that narrative and giving the information and being a source of information and helping others learn from the mistakes that I've made. Ask questions. Ask all of the questions.
More. Ask more questions. I love it. Wow. Of course. Thank you for your time. I always love spending time with you, whether it's Zoom or person or voice note. Love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
Cool.
Enjoy the rest of your day, my G.
I'm gonna go and eat some oats.
We love it.
See ya later.
Bye.
Bye.